Good morning, CLC. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your love and your presence. Thank you for the I am that you are. I invite you now, in this moment and at this time, to just be in remembrance of that I am. If you feel so inclined, go ahead and take a nice, deep, cleansing breath in, breathing in the cool, calming oxygen that surrounds you. And as you release the breath, release all that no longer serves you. Allow any doubts or tension, any stress or anxiety to just wash away for now. If you feel so inclined, go ahead and take another nice, deep, cleansing breath in. And as you release this breath, allow your body to just relax in this moment and allow your mind to be here, present, now. Universal love enfolds me. Universal wisdom inspires me. Universal spirit enlightens me. Universal power encircles me. I am one, and all is well. As we begin this inner healing process, let me invite you to relax in quiet confidence, opening yourself up to the miracle-working higher power. Now symbolize the unity of your thinking and feeling nature by touching your chest with your hand, and let my words act as your own for your own inner healing, acceptance, and receptivity. I acknowledge that there is a power, intelligence, and wisdom greater than my own. I am in the midst of it, and it is in the midst of me, sensitive and responsive to my every thought, word, action, and feeling. I now make this true for myself by saying aloud, I acknowledge. Acknowledging this higher power working through my life, I admit that I am personally responsible for solving my own problems while being guided and assisted by something greater than I am. As I surrender the conflicts of my ego to the wisdom of this infinite presence, I simply speak these words: I surrender. Knowing that forgiveness is the key to unconditional love and the feeling of heaven, I now unconditionally forgive anyone and everyone who has ever injured me in any way, real or imagined. And I now forgive myself for all of my mistaken judgments and their resulting actions. From my deepest level of understanding, I now say, I forgive. Realizing that I continually experience the effects of my own thinking, I now choose to allow this higher power to recreate me deeply, filling my mind with thoughts that are only positive, constructive, loving, and beautiful. I call upon this divine inflow by stating aloud, I choose. I now center upon that one very special idea that I'm willing to accept as real for me in this coming week. Visualizing that idea as already acted upon and brought to pass. In seeing my idea become a fact of my experience, I enjoy the happiness and peace of my thought fulfilled and gratefully speak these words. I accept. Knowing that I have an everlasting place in the midst of the power that sustains all creation, as well as the support of all those around me. I allow myself to relax in the peace of fulfillment and gratitude and say, I release. Now, in my mind's eye, I envision the presence of someone near and dear to me. This could be a friend, a family member, a teacher or mentor, someone who has touched my life in deep and loving ways, someone who may not be present in this room or on this planet anymore. I turn to that image in my mind's eye and say, I'm grateful for the good in your life. Now I open my eyes, turn to the world around me, and joyfully speak to anyone physically present in this room or virtually on this broadcast, and share in confidence and gratitude in saying, I'm grateful for the good in your lives.
Despair and saying, get me out of this, because that's not how it works. That's just not how it works. It works on accumulated energy, accumulated faith, accumulated belief, just like self-confidence does, just like success does, just like anything else that you apply yourself to does. You build it up through practice. Look at what athletes do. They're training all the time. They're learning all the time. Look at what musicians do. They're practicing. I come in here on Sunday morning. It doesn't seem, whatever time I get here on a Sunday morning, there's somebody on this stage practicing something. And this guy here is here into the afternoon practicing, aren't you? Yeah, most of the time. Most of the time. Where nobody sees you, there's no applause, there's no money in it for you, but you're practicing your craft for when the lights come up, for when there are people in the seats. That's how it works. That's how you do your job when you go to work tomorrow morning. You're building on what came before. There's no failure. There's just before. There's no final success. There's just before. There's just what came before. And you build on that, and you build on that, and off you go into the future. Well, the same is true of spiritual work. One of the great misapprehensions that we have in the culture is this thing called grace that our Christian friends teach. It's a beautiful idea, but they make it sound sometimes like it's a one-off deal. Like you're suddenly saved and you're good to go. And that's all you need to know. But every time you confront something in your life or in the world's life, you draw on this reserve of energy that's built up through repetitive prayer. So today is about building on that idea. What comes forward and understanding that everything started out as an idea. Everything that's in form, every great civilization that stands, it all started as an idea that somebody had. And often they had the idea before they knew where the idea was going to lead. In fact, pretty much always. They had the idea before they even knew they were having the idea for something. You ever had that happen? Where you realized that you knew something at some point, but you didn't necessarily put it into play, and now here it is coming back to you. This is something Emerson talked about. He said our thoughts come back with a certain alienated majesty. It's like you get an idea for an invention or a discovery or a song or a poem or what have you, and you don't act on it, and now somebody else does, because it's like the thing is looking for somewhere to land, and if it doesn't land on you, it lands on the next person or the person up the street, and now they're coming out, and you're like, I had that idea. No, you didn't have the idea. The idea flew by. If you'd had the idea, possessed the idea, taken the idea in, then you would have had the action behind it, but somebody else had the idea. Somebody else made it to the patent office before you did. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is there's no end to these ideas. Another misapprehension we have in the culture is that opportunity knocks, and if you don't answer the door, well, you've blown it. You missed it. Your life is over as you knew it. No, that's not true. Opportunity keeps knocking. It knocks on the door. It goes round to the window, you know. It comes down the chimney. Opportunity is coming at you every which way to manifest something new in your life and in the world's life. And if you pass up on one idea, somebody else sure to snag it, but the next idea coming along, you learn, well, then I'm going to jump. I'm going to take the risk with this idea. Things are a risk. Every time you grow, every time you stretch, it's a risk. Every time you try to make a friend, it's a risk. Every time you extend yourself in love, it's a risk. You could be rejected. We spend our lives avoiding rejection. We spend our lives avoiding abandonment. We find ourselves creating ourselves alone. We push people away from us because if we let them get too close, they may up and leave after we've learned to depend on them. So it seems safer and better to keep them at a distance from the get-go. The problem is we're working at cross purposes to what we really desire in our hearts. It's a strange strategy. It kind of works for a while, you know. But ultimately what we have to do is give in. You have to give in to love. You have to give in to spirit. Love is spirit. God is love. God is the activity of love. God is the expression of love in the world. We have to give in to that at some point, okay? We think sometimes and hear sometimes about destiny. This is yet another term. I'm making a list, a year-end list of stuff that we have the wrong idea about, just to bring it to you to try to clear it all up. I want to get it all cleared up by the end of the year. Everything that we have a wrong idea about, okay? And this is purely subjective because you may not like my wrong ideas. You may think they're right ideas, and that's cool too, you know, but it's like I got a job to do here, so I'm going to do it. All right, destiny. Destiny is not an appointed thing to us. It's not like God off in the sky says, well, you down there, you shouldn't be doing that. You should put that down, stop that, put that down, and go over here and do this, and that's your destiny. That's not how it works either, I really don't think. Destiny is self-created. Destiny generates itself out of each successive choice that we make. Things begin to line up in a new way for us. We discover talents that we didn't know we had, and an application for those talents. And so I have a story to tell you today. Try to tie all this together, which is a story that I tell, I think, about every 5 years. I don't think I've told it more often than that, but I'll be able to see if I did because your eyes will start to cross and be like, oh, that story again. But I don't think I have, and I don't think for those of you in the room today, this morning, I don't think you've heard the story. Some of you have never heard it. That's the hope here. It's a new story. It's actually an old story, but it's new to you. And I tell it about this, when I tell it about this time of year because it's sort of kind of got a Renaissance festival vibe to it, you know, because it's about that mystical place called merry old England, the place that never was exactly that, but it lives in, you know, we have these myths that we like that are kind of warm and cozy, and this character named King Arthur. This is the King Arthur story. Those of you that are watching at home and have heard this before, this is your cue to find another service at another center this morning that you want to watch. You come back for giving time, though. It'll be in about 20 minutes, I should think. So I read this story. I'd heard of King Arthur, you know, but I read this story when I was in high school, and it's a backstory on his life about which we know very little, his life. He was a mythical character. He would have lived around the, I think, 8th century. And he wasn't written about until considerably later, and a lot of people aren't even sure he really existed. He could be a combinative character of different leaders, tribal leaders, and so on, among the Angles and Jutes and Saxons and tribes that existed in England at the time. But a guy named T.H. White wrote a book called The Once and Future King, and he created a backstory for King Arthur that I fell in love with, and I didn't know why. I thought it was interesting. And in fact, I went to my high school English teacher, whatever year, junior year, I think it was, and I said, "Can we read this book?" Because they were asking, if anybody had a suggestion of a book for everyone to read. And so I succeeded in having this book visited upon my high school class, where I'm probably still not, welcome. And it's a backstory that will remind you kind of, how Wicked, they're coming out with the movie, the musical. It's a backstory, right, to The Wizard of Oz and kind of other characters and what they were up to. Well, so this is the story. So as befits a song that you're going to hear in a few minutes, I'm going to start with the end in mind, give you the end of the story and work backward from there. Because it was years later, after I read it, that I realized it's metaphysics in action. It's a story that's applicable to all of us, which is why I'm telling it to you here. So you may recall that King Arthur came to be the king of all England and unified all of the different tribes and headed off into a glorious future, although he had some travails along the way and things kind of turned into a sort of a tragic outcome in the long view. But in the short view, it was this great triumphant moment for the culture, for the people, and so on. And that he became the king of all England by pulling a sword out of a stone that had appeared out of nowhere. The stone, an enormous boulder, the sword, a great broad sword, plunged to its hilt into this rock and emblazoned on the rock, I think in Latin, it said, "Whosoever shall pull this sword from this stone," this sword named Excalibur, is the rightful king of all England. And this thing sat in the middle of a street in London where hundreds of individuals came and tried their luck at extracting this sword from this stone, with no luck whatsoever, until Arthur successfully did. Well, 18 years or so before this, he was born. He was a foundling. He was an illegitimate child. And he was sent off to live with a regional tribal king named Uther Pendragon in his castle with his family. And Uther Pendragon was a remote, distant, kind of unfeeling father figure to him. He had his own biological son named Kay, spelled C-E-I. And on Kay, he poured out all his love and generosity and spoiled the kid rotten and made Arthur his squire, his servant, basically. Arthur, who wasn't even called Arthur because he was so neglected and such a second-hand thought, in this household, they called him Wart. They called him Wart. What an awful nickname. And so Wart cleaned up after Kay, followed Kay around, groomed his horse for him, polished his armor for him. Kay was being educated in all the knightly arts, and Wart trailed after him as he did. He picked him up and dusted him off and worked from morning till night and got meager food and meager accommodations and no love and no respect. And he took it without complaint. And he did what he had to do because he said, this is my life. This is what's in front of me to do. And so one day, Kay is going to be a great knight, and I'll be his squire, and I'll help him reach his destiny. And that was all he thought his life was going to amount to. Well, one day they're out in a meadow, and they're practicing falconry, which was a knightly art, you know. And Kay has the falcon on his wrist, on the glove, and he's training it to come back, fly off and come back and stuff. And the falcon at this juncture flies off, and it disappears, goes into the woods. And, well, you can't just let the thing go. So guess who had to go find it? So Wart set off to the woods. The deep, dark, foreboding woods, which, by the way, turn up a lot in fairy tales, the dark woods. They're a metaphor, right? So he goes into the dark woods, and he's calling for the falcon, and he's calling for the falcon, and the woods kind of close over him, you know. And he thought he knew, did I come from that direction, or maybe it was over here? Now he's lost his bearings, you know, and the woods closing over him. He can't spot the sun, and he's not sure what direction to head, and he's panicking, you know. He's got to find. Now it's coming on dark. He's been in the woods for an hour or two or three, and it's coming on nightfall. And where is this bird? And and he's despairing. And what am I going to do? And all of a sudden it's dark. It's pitch black in the woods. Can't see a thing. But he's got to keep moving forward, calling for this falcon, listening for every rustle in the brush, you know. He sees a light. Sees a light in the middle of the forest. Heads toward the light. There's a shack. Light coming out the window. Knocks on the door of the shack. Guy opens it. Looks like a wizard. He's got a big pointy hat on, you know. And he says, my name's Wart, and I'm looking for my falcon. Oh, yes, come in. There sits the falcon inside the shack on one of those, you know, bird post-looking things. Perch. Bird perch. Inside the shack, it's not a shack. Inside the shack, it's a palace. I mean, this place is enormous. And it is filled with books and globes and beakers of stuff bubbling, chemistry experiments, you know, all of this. Animals everywhere, just constant. And this wizard character who's, well, Arthur, I've been waiting for you. And he's like, why do you call me Arthur? He said, well, that's your name. No, I'm Wart. No, that's just what they call you. Your real name's Arthur. And I've been waiting for you because it's time for your education to begin. Really? Yes. My name, says the wizard, is Merlin. And I'm here to be your teacher. And you're a little bit late, but that's all right. We'll get started. And so they get started. And what the lessons consist of is experiential material, the way the best lessons in life occur. See, what I'm hoping is happening as I'm telling this story is that you're not thinking about me or looking at me or any of that, but you're looking at the inside of your mind. You're going into an interpretive space within you where you're having an experience of the story. That's what you hope to do when you tell the story. Well, this is what Merlin sets up for Arthur. He says, so, you came for the bird, you leave with the bird. But the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to be a bird. And without calling it this, he hypnotizes him. He puts him into sort of a trance. Merlin does. And Arthur starts to have this bird-like experience. He looks down, and suddenly where his arms were, he's got wings. And they fold back behind him, you know. And he's got claw-looking feet, and he's got a beak out here and stuff. And then what happens when he moves the wings? Well, he elevates, you know, and he flies. And he flies out the door through the woods, which are no longer woods. They're like the vista below. He's now up hundreds of feet. And he's looking down on him. And there's the castle that he lives in, Uther Pendragon's, and he's circling around this. And now he's turning upside down, and now he's doing loop-de-loops and barrel rolls, and he's doing all kinds of fun stuff, and it's great, and he loves it. It's so freeing. He feels so alive. And eventually gets a little tired, circles back, finds the wood, finds the cabin, the shack, you know, flies in the door, back into the perch, back into the chair where he'd begun, comes to, and he's a boy again. Seems like hours and hours have gone by. Now he's a little panicky again. He lives in a constant state of anxiety, this young man. Well, he's panicky again. I'm late. Kay's going to have me beaten. I won't get food tonight because I'm so... And come to find out, he's been gone like 15 minutes. You know? So he returns to the castle and to his duties with Kay, and Merlin says, I'll see you again this time next week or so. And he goes back. And the next time, he's a fish. And he learns to swim as a fish. He learns to communicate as fish do. Now where his arms were, they kind of fold into him. He's got gills and breathing through the gills. And most of his movement now is generated by his lower body. So he's swimming, you know, as a fish, and this is freeing, and this is wonderful. He can go up and down and sideways, and you know what else? There are other fish, and he learns how to communicate with them. They're in what's called a school of fish, another metaphor, right? And so he's swimming with the school of fish, and he's doing all of this, and again, all this time passes. In fact, at this stage of the game, it's like weeks he spends with the fish, and he's freaking out because he's going to be where they're going to send out a search party for me, but it turns out it hasn't been very long at all. And he's back helping out Kay until the next time. And he'd love to tell somebody about all this, but who would believe him, you know? And then it's time for him to come back again to Merlin, and this time he's an ant. And he learns how ants function. They function in community. Ants are not solitary creatures. They're communal creatures. They have a project, and they all work together, and they lift many times their weight and so on, and they're obedient to a little voice they hear in their heads, you know. It's like their intuition, and so he becomes an ant, and he's an ant for weeks and weeks and weeks. And he builds, and he carries, and he does all of this, and he learns obedience, and he learns single-minded attention, which he'd also learned as a bird to spot prey, like the falcon does, you know. It's not just good eyesight, it's concentration. And he's turned into a horse, and he's turned into a bear, and he's turned into a sheep, and on and on and on. His education goes on for I don't know how long, a year or two anyway. All these different animals. And he never asks in the story, Merlin, where is all this going? Right? Never occurs to him. I guess it would kind of move the story ahead too fast, you know. But where it was going was this. There's an announcement made of a big tournament happening in London. And Kay is invited to go. And it's the last threshold for him to cross to receive knighthood. So it's a very big deal. So they take off for London, Kay with Arthur Ward, his squire. They packed up swords and armor and archery equipment and all manner of things that they needed for this. And they go down to London and they go to this inn and they stay. And there's time, the big day comes. It's a Saturday, I think, and they're to go to the fairgrounds, go to the jousting grounds, for this tournament to begin. So they head off, and suddenly Arthur realizes with horror he's brought the wrong sword from the inn. He's brought like the practice sword and not the real deal. And oh no. And Kay is, of course, furious. Kay has a real short fuse of temper. So Ward goes back to the inn. It's all locked up. Everybody's gone to the tournament. He's banging on the door. Please, please, you got to let me in to get this sword. But they're all gone. There's no hope. There's nothing can be done. So he has to tell Kay. He has to trudge back, find him, tell him, break the news to him that everything's ruined because of him, because of his carelessness. He turns a corner, and there's this rock sitting in the middle of the street with the sword stuck in it. And emblazoned on the rock, it says, whoever pulls this sword from this stone is therefore the rightful king of all England. But he doesn't read that because it's on the other side of the rock from where he is. All he sees is duty. I need that sword. I need to borrow that sword, and I'll bring it back. He climbs up on the rock. He grabs the sword. He starts to pull. It's stuck. Hundreds of people have tried to pull this thing out without success. He can't do it. He can't do it. But he's got to do it. But he can't do it. But he's got to do it. And suddenly he's a bird. Suddenly the bird consciousness comes into him of single-minded focus. And use those muscles back there that move those wings, And suddenly the fish consciousness comes into him. The lower body activity, the flexibility, the fluidity, to be able to do this. Suddenly the ant consciousness comes into him of obedience to an ideal. Suddenly all of the different properties and capacities of all of these different creatures that he's become, however briefly, all of these things come together, and they come together like a symphony. They come together like a crescendo, of notes, all in harmony, all pulling together. And with one great surging move, he extracts the sword from the stone. Only to notice that while he was processing this, doing this, a crowd gathered. A crowd gathered who heard somebody was trying it, and this time it might actually work. And all of a sudden, all around him, everyone he sees drops to one knee, because he has proven himself the king. So I tell you this story because each one of us is going to turn a corner down a street where there's going to be something sitting there that we don't know what to do with it, but it's going to fulfill a need that we have, or a need that exists in the culture for service, for justice, for something to happen that's going to call on us and all of the capacities and all of the abilities that we have nurtured over the years without knowing where they were leading. All of this will come together in a great crescendo of sound and light, color, and beauty and wonder, and establish us as successful, I guess you would say. Successful. Not king over others, but master of our own destiny. Captain of our own soul. Running our own ship. Knowing that with us, all things are possible because of the spiritual life that we are, that has created us for just such a moment as this. All of these accumulated experiences that you and I have had, that we wonder where they're all leading, that's where they're leading. They're leading to today. They're leading to this moment and everything that comes next. So as we go forward with this year, next week we're going to talk about gratitude. We're going to talk about the ancestors, about family, about all of the emotions that come up around holidays like Thanksgiving. And then we're going to, when we finish the regular service, we're going to take a little break, and we're going to come back and have our annual Thanksgiving testimonial service. And what that is everybody's invited to come up, including these people that are watching online now that you don't know who they are, so you run home and look at Facebook. They're going to be on Zoom. And we're all going to get to share briefly what we're grateful for. The stuff that's wonderful in our lives, the stuff that's not wonderful in our lives, but that we learned something from, that occurred over the past year. All of that coming up. And then in December, Danielle is going to speak on the first Sunday of the month. And then we're going to have some wonderful stuff having to do with the Christ idea, the Christ mind, a new model of the universe as we go through December and head into the new year. So get ready for something amazing to happen in your life, because now you know more today of who you are than you ever have before in your entire journey. Okay? And all of that is working together for good. Let's know together now there is one life, one power, one presence, pure spirit, everywhere radiant, everywhere manifesting. Everywhere mind moves and form follows. It's been said, does wind move? Does water move when wind moves it? And in the Zen idea, it is said, neither wind nor water move. Only mind moves. Only mind moves. And when mind moves, form is sure to follow. That is to say, there's a demonstration, there's a manifestation of some particular good. So I affirm and know for each one of us here today, there's a manifestation occurring. Great good is unfolding. High and holy purpose is making itself known for each one of us. No one is left out of this. No one is a squire to somebody else's knighthood. We collaborate, yes, but never in servitude, never as less than. For each one of us is a pillar in the temple. Each one of us is essential to the manifestation of the divine idea. For this knowing, for its outcome and form, everywhere we turn, I am so deeply grateful. I release this word now into the infinite, calling it done, and so it is. And all of this happens on Zoom. And last week, we had an event on Zoom that's on Facebook, it's on YouTube, and I encourage you to watch it, as almost 400 people have already. It was a conversation I had with two individuals who have helped create the first Science of Mind teaching chapter in Cuba. In a small town on the south shore of Cuba, where the first Cuban practitioner, was recently licensed. And that woman will ride in the back of a truck 7 hours, I think they said, to get to Havana to meet with a handful of people who are interested in this. Because the Wi-Fi is so spotty, they can't do it like we do here, where everything's just streamed and stuff. It pretty much has to happen in person. And there's a real hunger for this teaching out in the world. And to hear how they're feeding that hunger is truly inspirational, with the help of a Canadian man, Gordon Lilly, practitioner in Winnipeg. So check it out. It's called a Soul Session. We've been doing these for 7 years now, and they happen about every other month. We're going to take December off, pick back up in January, but you can watch it. And Everything else that's going on around here is in your weekly emails. If you don't get the weekly emails, please put your name in the guest book out here, and we'll be sure to add you to the list. Is anybody here for the first time this morning? Yeah, we just met. Thank you so much. We have a visitor pack for you. Monica, would you mind? They're at the back in a basket. And we come to giving time, the inevitable. The opportunity to act in support of this place. We're having issues with the septic system again, which we've been fortunate, well, through the pandemic it wasn't used, but for the last 3.5 years we've been very fortunate. It's not given us any trouble at all, and now it's decided to act up. So we have to respond, and how you fix a septic system is you open it and you pour money in, okay? Lots and lots of money. So we could use lots and lots of money. If you have some money out there for this, to keep this property up, it's property, and that's what you do. So we appreciate, seriously, your generosity, and know that as you give, you open a powerful place in yourself to receive. Let's say together now, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all the good I am and have, all the good I give and receive. I am prosperous now, and so it is.
As Jesse was speaking earlier, it made me think of this poem. I pulled it up on my phone. Yes, it was a poem, of course. I pulled it up on my phone because I have it almost sort of memorized, but I wanted to make sure I read it correctly. And it's a very popular poem. A lot of you may or may not already know it. This is by Langston Hughes, and the name of it is I Too Sing America. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes. But I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll sit at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. Mm-hmm. And now, as we depart, I would like us to remember that you are too the I am. I invite you now to remember with me that there is one life, one love, one rhythm, one spirit. It is in the falcons that soar in the sky. It is in the fish that swim in the sea. And it's in each and every one of you. It is in that and through that spirit that we live our life, love, and give thanks. It is with this gratitude in our hearts, with the gift of the I am in our spirit, and the knowing that we are one with all, that we depart from one another. And I give thanks. I am grateful. I am knowing. And I release this word into existence, calling it done. And so it is.
Say with me now, something wonderful is happening through me.
Something wonderful is happening through me.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my body.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in my mind.
I feel it in everything I am.
I feel it in everything I am.
I choose it.
I choose it.
I trust it.
I trust it.
I use it. And I love it. And so it is.
So it is.